I can still hear his voice echoing across that restaurant. "Your dad drives a truck for a living. He can't sit at our table." My son-in-law Marcus said it loud enough for half the dining room to hear, and his mother, she just sat there with that satisfied smirk on her face. That was the moment everything changed. Let me back up. My name is Dorothy Hayes, and I'm 62 years old. This story is about my daughter Emma, my husband Frank, and the night that should have been a celebration but turned into something none of us will ever forget. Emma met Marcus Reynolds 3 years ago at some corporate networking event in Chicago. He was an investment banker, she was a project manager at a tech firm. He wore expensive suits, drove a Tesla, and his mother Vivian Reynolds made sure everyone knew she was old money from Connecticut. They got engaged after just 8 months, and Emma was so happy I didn't want to say anything about the red flags I was already seeing. Frank and I raised Emma in a small town in Wisconsin. We weren't rich, but we gave her everything she needed. Frank has been a long-haul truck driver for 38 years. He'd leave Monday morning and come home Friday night, sometimes Saturday. He missed school plays and parent-teacher conferences, but he never missed a tuition payment. Emma went to college without loans because of those long hours on the highway. I worked as a receptionist at a dental office for 30 years before I retired. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house. We drove older cars. We shopped at regular stores, not boutiques. But we were proud of our daughter, and she was proud of us. At least, I thought she was. The problem started about 6 months after Emma and Marcus got married. Suddenly, Emma was too busy to visit on Sundays. Phone calls got shorter. When we did see her, she seemed tense, like she was walking on eggshells. I noticed she'd stopped mentioning Frank's job around Marcus and Vivian. When Vivian asked what Frank did, Emma said something vague like transportation logistics. I asked Emma about it once. "Honey, are you embarrassed of your dad?" She got defensive. "No, Mom, of course not. It's just Marcus's family is different. They wouldn't understand." "Understand what? That your father works hard? That he provided for you?" She didn't answer. She just changed the subject. Things came to a head last October. Emma and Marcus's first wedding anniversary was coming up, and Vivian insisted on throwing them an anniversary dinner at the Wellington, this ridiculously expensive steakhouse in downtown Chicago. The kind of place where the menu doesn't have prices and the waiters wear white gloves. Emma called me 2 weeks before. "Mom, Vivian is planning this big dinner for our anniversary. She's inviting all of Marcus's family, some of his colleagues, people from their country club." "That sounds lovely, sweetheart. What time should Dad and I be there?" There was a long pause. Too long. "Emma?" "Mom, I don't think Dad should come." My heart sank. "What?" It's going to be very formal. Very high society. Marcus's uncle is a senator. His cousin runs a hedge fund. These people are what, Emma? Better than your father?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." I took a deep breath. "Emma Marie Hayes, your father worked 60-hour weeks so you could have a life these people were born into. And now you're telling me he's not good enough to sit at a table with them?" She started crying. "Mom, please don't make this harder." Vivian already made a comment about Dad at the wedding. She asked Marcus why the father of the bride was wearing a rental tux. She laughed about it to her friends. I can't deal with that again." "So you're choosing them over us?" "I'm choosing not to be humiliated." Those words hung in the air like poison. I hung up. I couldn't listen anymore. Frank came home that Friday evening. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, and he knew immediately something was wrong. "Dottie, what happened?" I told him. I watched this strong man, this man who'd driven through blizzards and 100-degree heat, who'd worked through back pain and exhaustion. I watched him shrink right there in his favorite chair. "She's ashamed of me," he said quietly. "Frank." "No, Dottie. Let's call it what it is. Our daughter is ashamed of me." He went upstairs. I heard the bedroom door close. Frank doesn't cry often, but I knew he was crying then. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about all the sacrifices, the Christmases Frank missed because he took extra runs to save money. The way Emma used to wait by the window on Friday evenings, watching for his truck, how she'd run outside screaming, "Daddy!" and jump into his arms. When did that little girl turn into someone who was embarrassed by the man who gave her everything? The next morning, Frank came downstairs with red eyes but his jaw set. "We're going to that dinner," he said. "Frank," Emma said. "I don't care what Emma said. It's our daughter's anniversary. We're invited by the hosts. We're going." He had that tone, the one that meant he'd made up his mind and nothing would change it. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I'm going to show up. I'm going to be polite. And I'm going to let my daughter decide who she really wants to be." I called Emma that afternoon. "Your father and I will be at the dinner. You don't have to talk to us if you don't want to, but we're coming." She tried to argue, but I hung up before she could finish. The anniversary dinner was on a Saturday night. Frank wore his best, actually, his only suit. It was the same one he wore to Emma's wedding, probably 15 years old but clean and pressed. I wore a simple black dress from Kohl's. We drove Frank's pickup truck to the restaurant because our sedan was in the shop. The Wellington was exactly as intimidating as I'd imagined. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, men in tuxedos opening doors. The valet looked at Frank's pickup truck like it was something contaminated. Inside, a hostess in a sleek black dress checked the reservation list. "Hayes? Ah, yes, you're with the Reynolds party. This way, please." She led us through the dining room. I could feel eyes on us. Frank's suit was clean but obviously old. My dress was department store, not designer. We stuck out like dandelions in a rose garden. The Reynolds party had taken over a private dining room in the back. Long table, white tablecloth, silver candlesticks, the works. About 20 people were already seated or standing with cocktails. Everyone looked like they'd stepped out of a yacht club catalog. Emma saw us first. Her face went pale, then red. She rushed over. "Mom, Dad, I didn't think you'd actually come to our daughter's anniversary dinner," Frank said quietly. "Why wouldn't we?" Marcus appeared at Emma's elbow. He was holding a glass of something amber, probably whiskey, that cost more than our monthly grocery bill. He looked at Frank's suit, and I saw his jaw tighten. "Frank." "Dorothy, glad you could make it." His tone said the opposite. Vivian Reynolds materialized like a designer-clad ghost. She was wearing what I'd later learn was a Chanel suit and pearls that probably cost more than our house. "Oh, Emma's parents." She said it the way someone might say cockroaches. "How rustic." "Mother," Marcus said quietly, but he didn't sound like he was scolding her. He sounded like he agreed. "Well, come in, Vivian continued. "We can find somewhere to squeeze you. Perhaps near the end of the table?" The end of the table was code for as far from the important people as possible. Frank just nodded. We followed Vivian to our seats. They were indeed at the very end, next to the door to the kitchen. Every time a waiter came through, we had to shift our chairs. It was deliberate. A statement about where we belonged in Vivian's world. Dinner started. The first course was oysters. I'd never eaten an oyster in my life and wasn't about to start. Frank politely declined. I saw Vivian whisper something to the woman next to her. They both looked at us and laughed behind their hands. The conversation at the other end of the table was loud and animated. Talk about vacations in the Hamptons, upcoming charity galas, someone's son getting into Yale. No one spoke to us. It was like we were invisible. I watched Emma. She sat between Marcus and his cousin, wearing a forced smile, barely eating. She wouldn't look at us. She was pretending we weren't there. My heart was breaking for Frank. He sat there with his calloused hands folded on his lap, this man who'd given everything for his daughter, being treated like hired help. Then came the moment that changed everything. Vivian stood up with her wine glass. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced. Everyone quieted down. "To my wonderful son Marcus and his beautiful wife Emma. 1 year ago, you two became one family. The Reynolds family has a legacy of excellence, of achievement, of class. Emma, welcome to a world where success is measured not by how hard you work, but by how smart you work." She looked directly at Frank when she said it. "Here's to the next generation carrying on our standards." People applauded. Marcus beamed. Emma looked sick. Vivian wasn't done. "Of course, we're all family now." She gestured vaguely in our direction, though some branches of the family tree are more established than others. A few people laughed. Emma's face was bright red. Marcus stood up next. He'd had a few drinks by then, and his words were slightly slurred. I just want to thank everyone for being here. My real family. The people who matter. The people who understand what success looks like." He turned to Emma. "Babe, I know it was hard for you to leave behind your old life, your simple upbringing." More laughter. "But look at you now. Look at this." He gestured around the room. "This is what you deserved all along. You just had to get away from." He stopped himself, but his eyes flicked toward us. Frank's hand tightened into a fist on the table. I put my hand over his, but Marcus wasn't finished. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe it was Vivian's encouragement. But something made him say the next part out loud. "I mean, Emma's dad drives a truck for a living." He said truck like it was a dirty word. "He can't sit at our table and pretend to understand what we're talking about. Country clubs, investment strategies, international business, that's not his world." The room went silent. Every eye was on our end of the table. Vivian laughed this high, tinkling sound. "Marcus, darling, don't be rude. I'm sure Frank is very good at what he does. You know, delivering things." More laughter. Nervous, but still laughter. Frank stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the floor. All 6'2" of him rose to his full height. Even in his old suit, there was something commanding about him. "You're right," Frank said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "I do drive a truck. I've driven a truck for 38 years. Marcus smirked. "Exactly, Mai. Let me finish." Frank's voice had an edge now. "I drove a truck because it paid well. Because the long hours meant I could save money. Because I wanted my daughter to have opportunities I never had." He looked at Emma. "I drove through ice storms in January. I spent Thanksgivings in truck stops. I missed your dance recitals and your high school graduation party. But I never missed a payment. Not one. Not for your braces. Not for your college tuition. Not for your apartment in Chicago when you got your first job." Emma's eyes were filling with tears. "You want to know what I understand?" Frank continued. "I understand working 60-hour weeks. I understand sacrifice. I understand loving someone more than you love your own comfort." He turned to Marcus. "What do you understand? You grew up with a trust fund. You went to Princeton because Mommy made a phone call. You got your job because of Daddy's connections. You've never worked hard for anything in your life." Vivian gasped. "How dare you?" "I dare because it's true." Frank's voice was steel now. "You sit here in your expensive clothes at your fancy restaurant, looking down on people who actually work for a living. You think money makes you better. It doesn't. It just makes you rich." The room was frozen. A waiter had stopped halfway through the door with a tray of desserts. Frank looked at Emma one more time. "Baby girl, I love you. I will always love you. But I taught you better than this. Your mother and I taught you that people's worth isn't measured by their bank account or their zip code. If you've forgotten that," his voice cracked, "then I don't know who you are anymore." He turned to me. "Dottie, let's go." I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I managed. That's when Emma moved. She pushed her chair back so hard it fell over. She stood up, and in a voice I hadn't heard since she was a little girl, strong and clear, she said, "Wait." Everyone turned to look at her. Emma walked down the length of that table. Past Marcus, past Vivian, past all those people in their designer clothes with their judgmental eyes. She walked all the way to where Frank and I stood, and she took her father's hand. "Daddy, I'm so sorry." Tears were streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. You're right. I forgot. I forgot everything you and Mom taught me. I let these people make me feel like you weren't good enough, when really—" She looked back at Marcus and Vivian. "When really, they're not good enough for you." "Emma, sit down," Marcus hissed. "You're making a scene." "Good," Emma said. "Let me make a scene. Let everyone here know that my father is the best man I've ever known. He's worth 10 of you, Marcus. He's worth 100 of all of you combined." Vivian stood up, her face purple. "Emma Reynolds, you ungrateful little—" "My name is Emma Hayes," my daughter said, "and I think it's time we left." She kept holding Frank's hand and took mine with her other hand. The three of us walked out of that dining room together. Behind us, I heard Marcus calling Emma's name, heard Vivian saying something shrill and angry. We didn't turn around. We walked through that fancy restaurant, past the staring diners, past the shocked hostess, out into the cool October night. Frank's pickup truck was right there at the valet stand, looking beautifully out of place among the Mercedes and BMWs. We all climbed in, Emma in the middle, like she used to sit as a little girl. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Then Frank started laughing. Deep, genuine laughter. "What's funny?" Emma asked, wiping her tears. "I was just thinking about Vivian's face. Did you see her? I thought her head was going to explode." Emma started laughing too, that hiccuping laugh she gets when she's been crying. "Oh my God, Dad, when you said Marcus never worked for anything. It's true, though." "I know!" Emma was laughing and crying at the same time. "I've known it's true. I just didn't want to admit it." I was laughing too now, all three of us sitting in that old pickup truck, laughing like lunatics while the valet attendants stared at us. We drove to a diner, one of those 2-4-hour places with red vinyl booths and laminated menus. We ordered burgers and fries and milkshakes, and we talked, really talked, for the first time in months. Emma told us everything, how Vivian had been criticizing her from the start, how Marcus always took his mother's side, how she'd felt trapped, trying to fit into a world that made her feel less than unless she pretended to be someone she wasn't. "Why didn't you tell us?" I asked. "Because I was ashamed. Not of you, of myself. For letting them make me feel like I had to choose. For thinking their approval mattered more than yours." Frank reached across the table and took her hand. "You never have to choose between us and anyone, baby girl. If they make you choose, they're not worth keeping." Emma nodded. She picked up a French fry, then put it down. "I need to tell you both something." "Okay," I said carefully. "I want a divorce." Frank and I exchanged glances. "Honestly?" We weren't surprised. "Are you sure?" Frank asked. "I've never been more sure of anything. This isn't about tonight, though. Tonight made it crystal clear. Marcus and I, we want different things. He wants a trophy wife who looks good at his business dinners and doesn't challenge his mother. I want a partner who respects where I came from and loves the people I love. We were never going to work." "What about money?" I asked. "The apartment, I don't care about any of that. I have my own job, my own salary. I'll get a smaller place. I'll be fine." She smiled a real smile, the first I'd seen in months. "I'll be better than fine. I'll be free." We stayed at that diner until 2 in the morning, just talking and laughing and remembering who we were as a family. Now here's where the story gets interesting, the part Marcus and Vivian never saw coming. About a week after the dinner, Emma filed for divorce. Marcus was furious. Vivian was apoplectic. They tried everything, crying, threatening, promising to change. Emma held firm. During the divorce proceedings, financial disclosures had to be made. That's when Marcus and Vivian discovered something they never bothered to find out before. Frank didn't just drive trucks. Frank owned the trucks, all of them. 30 years ago, Frank bought his first truck outright, then a second, then a third. Over the years, he built it into a small fleet. Hayes Transport Company, 12 trucks, operating routes across the Midwest. Frank still drove one of them himself because he loved the road, but he had 11 other drivers working for him. The business was worth just over $3 million. The modest house we lived in, paid off, no mortgage. The old cars we drove, fully owned. We had no debt, none. And we had investments quietly building wealth for 38 years while living well below our means. When Marcus's lawyer saw the financial disclosures, he apparently went white. Vivian, when she found out, tried to call Emma. Suddenly they wanted to work things out. Suddenly Frank was such a hard-working man, and we may have misjudged him. Emma blocked their numbers. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Emma got her own apartment, a small one-bedroom she loved. She redecorated with photos of Frank and me, pictures from her childhood, things that reminded her of where she came from. Marcus, as it turned out, wasn't as financially stable as he pretended. Much of his success was leveraged big salary, yes, but bigger expenses. His apartment was mortgaged. His car was leased. When the divorce meant he had to cover everything alone instead of with Emma's income too, his house of cards started to wobble. Vivian's old money was older than she let on, meaning it was mostly gone. The Connecticut estate was sold years ago. She lived in a rent-controlled apartment and maintained appearances through careful spending and a lot of lies. As for Frank and me, we're doing great. Emma comes over every Sunday now. We cook dinner together, watch movies, Talk about her new job, she switched to a company with better values and better people. Last month, Frank retired. Sold the trucking company to one of his longtime drivers for a fair price with a payment plan that will keep money coming in for years. We're planning a road trip just for fun this time, in an RV, no delivery schedule, no deadlines. And Emma? She's dating again. A teacher she met at a friend's barbecue. He came to Sunday dinner last week. The first thing he said to Frank was, "Sir, Emma tells me you built a business from scratch. I'd love to hear about that." He listened to Frank's stories about the road like they were the most interesting things he'd ever heard. He drives a Honda Civic and teaches 8th grade math. He'll never be rich. But when he looks at Emma, I see something Marcus never had: genuine love, not possession. That anniversary dinner was 8 months ago. Sometimes Emma talks about it, about how close she came to losing herself, how she almost threw away everything real for something shiny and hollow. "You know what I learned, Mom?" she said to me last week. "People who need to constantly prove they're better than you are usually just scared that they're not." Smart girl, my daughter. It took her a while, but she figured it out. And Marcus? I heard through the grapevine that he married again. Another young woman from a humble background, someone he could mold and control, someone who hasn't learned yet that you can't build a life on shame and pretense. I feel sorry for her. I hope she learns faster than Emma did. As for that restaurant, the Wellington, we drove past it last weekend. Frank pointed at it and grinned. "Remember when I got kicked out of there?" "You didn't get kicked out," I corrected. "You walked out." "Even better," he said. "We went to that same diner instead. Same red vinyl booths, same greasy burgers. Emma ordered a chocolate milkshake just like old times." "You know what?" Emma said, stealing one of Frank's fries. "This is better than any 5-star restaurant." "Obviously," Frank said. "This place has character, and they don't judge you for driving a truck." We all laughed, because now it was funny. Now the sting was gone, replaced by the satisfaction of knowing we'd stayed true to ourselves when others tried to make us feel small. That's the thing about class and money and all those invisible lines people draw. They only have power if you let them. The moment you stand up and say, "This is who I am," take it or leave it, that's the moment you win. Marcus and Vivian never learned that lesson. They're still living in that world where your worth is measured by labels and price tags, and whether you got into the right schools or know the right people. But Emma learned it. She learned that the most valuable things, love, respect, integrity, family, can't be bought or sold or traded. They're earned through actions, not possessions. And Frank always knew it. He just had to wait for his daughter to remember. Every Sunday when Emma comes over, she hugs Frank extra long. "Thanks for not giving up on me, Daddy," she whispers. "Never, baby girl," he says. "Never." And that right there is worth more than all of Vivian Reynolds's pearls and Marcus's trust fund and every fancy dinner at the Wellington combined. That's the real measure of wealth, not what's in your bank account, but who's sitting at your table. And I'll take a greasy diner booth with my family over a crystal chandelier with snobs any day of the week. Some people spend their whole lives chasing status and money and approval from people who don't matter. They miss what's right in front of them, the people who loved them before they had anything to offer except themselves. Emma almost made that mistake. Thank God she caught herself in time. These days, when people ask Emma about her family, she talks about Frank's trucking company with pride. She tells them about the time he drove through a blizzard to get home for her birthday. She shows them pictures of our modest house with its paid-off mortgage and our old cars that run just fine. And when people try to judge her for not living like Marcus's crowd anymore, for not wearing designer labels or vacationing in the Hamptons, she just smiles. "My dad built something real," she says. "That's worth more than pretending to be something I'm not." Damn right it is, baby girl. Damn right it is.